Good evening, and welcome to Nerd Rage, episode 192. I remembered. Shut up. I remember. Um, it's been a whole week, and we're actually doing another show. Two shows. Two shows in a row. That's... Gosh, it's weird. It's weird. Because I think we really started... I feel like we started dropping off towards the end, right? Where we ended up skipping a couple of times, and then we had the last, and then we had 190, which is where you were here, and that was it. But
I was actually there in that space that you occupy currently.
yes, that is correct. That is
It's
precisely
weird.
precisely what I suggested. It was terrifying. But yeah, so yeah, we're back again for another week of terrible quality commentary, both video and audio.
Okay.
And with all the, you don't have to agree with that. Uh, and this week we have a lot of things. This week we actually have a lot of things to talk about, and not nearly enough time to talk about it, really. But we will get through what we can get through before I really have to go to bed. So, yeah, I would say, excuse me, voice. Thank you, voice, for doing that. So I would say, let's start with the big let's start with the big thing of the week, GameStop.
I mean, yeah, that's a good place to start, especially if you have a show called Nerd Rage.
No, yeah. Though, admittedly, I would say GameStop is incidental to the story. It could have been any. It really could have been any company. It's just that
It
because
could have,
it's
but
just because GameStop is particularly noteworthy for having been basically a dying company for the past 7 years since the advent of of digital downloads for video games as opposed to physical copies. That I think that helped to boost the profile a bit.
funny is that somehow GameStop keeps ending up in the news. I mean, that's where the It's Ma'am happened, and I mean there have been what was it? They wouldn't shut down for the pandemic, and
Yes, they tried.
so
Yes, they believe themselves to be an essential service somehow. Somehow.
well, everyone was stuck at home, so they kind of were.
I mean, I
Okay,
guess
can you
if you didn't.
park it right here, Fatty?
Yes, I mean, yeah. In that sense, if only people didn't download their video games for the most part these days. But but yeah, no. No, but that made the second half of the week an interesting one, though. The whole stock thing, and blowing up hedge funds thing, and what as it turns out it's actually a bit of a, what's the word, not a subsidiary, but it's oddly enough part of the general culture war we seem to have evolved into recently.
Yeah, I don't think anything really depicts like average Joe Blow America and versus big money, big politics than GameStop taking over Wall Street.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it
And the
was
fact that it was powered by Reddit, that's just hilarious.
of course they shut that subreddit down now. Just like they shut down the day trading for the stocks in question. Um, and it's a little bit shocking is the wrong word. Surprising is the wrong word. It's neither of those things. But I guess appalling is actually really the better word, because um, the way it once again reinforces the idea that 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 there's the elites in power, and then there's just regular people, and the way it just reinforces that divide. It's especially in this very time where after the last election where that was so starkly demonstrated. Um,
Right.
I think it's very interesting.
I'm really starting to believe the calls for unity,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
by the fact that they keep trying to cancel absolutely everything that doesn't go their way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's a very striking period of time. It's a very striking period we live in, especially because this happened so soon after the inauguration too. Like, it would have been one thing if there
Mm.
had been like a month or two to cool down, but the fact that it just a couple of weeks later, and we're already seeing more evidence that, hey, you guys, that you're not, you guys, you normal people, you're not allowed to have any power. You know that.
Right.
I think.
Or wealth or influence or speech or really anything.
You just get to struggle and drag yourself across broken glass, and if you succeed, you succeed. If you don't, you don't. So
Yeah. It's I guess it's just surprising to me and how blatant it all is.
Mm-hmm.
Like nothing is hidden anymore. Like the election was blatantly
Oh, now I have to
and
censor that now.
and then you've got everything that Trump did that was good for America has just been repealed and
Yeah, it's
um
just been undone. That's the freaky part. This was
right.
always the thing we always kind of knew, that because Trump used executive orders so frequently, the fact that they can just be undone by more executive orders was always a problem. But let's be honest, the entire American system of government is kind of falling apart. It has been falling apart for years, but it's kind of like
Hmm.
blatantly falling apart now, where it's like more and more power seems to be invested in the executive branch and in the unelected parts of government, the bureaucracy and the judiciary. And even though people like Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell um, like to walk around acting like they have power, they really don't have any anymore. If you really think about
Mm.
it, they really are kind of powerless. How much policy gets enacted without any sort of real legislation, or any sort of real law being passed anymore? It's shockingly
You
little if
don't
you really
need
think
that
about it.
when as Obama, like, he had a pen and a phone,
Mm-hmm.
and then he just appointed czars of everything, which was bizarre.
And you have an
Um,
NSA and an EPA and a FDA and
mhm.
every other alphabet soup government organization you can think of that can just enact rules, by fiat, without any sort of
Right.
um, without any
All
sort
of
of.
these people in all of these positions that were never elected as representatives
Mm-hmm.
can, use the full force of the law to enact all of their ideas, because if you don't go along with it, then I mean, you're breaking the law. You can be arrested, you can be fined, and
Mm-hmm.
it's insane that we have no recourse as citizens and voters to get rid of them, or, all of the craziness that they inflict.
And that's the dangerous spot we find ourselves in, because it seems like now we have zero recourse. It's felt like that for a while now, but it became particularly pronounced during the Obama years, and then became extremely obvious during the Trump years, where we
Hmm.
watched as they constantly tried to subvert the Trump administration, and in the past year or so even, um, with Attorney General Barr, what a disappointment he was, and the Durham report any day now. Um, how utterly useless these mechanisms are. Like there's no point in having an
Mhm.
internal investigative audit if it's going to go nowhere.
Right.
Because ultimately it doesn't matter what they find, because it's going to be the same thing like with Hillary's emails, where hey, it's like something, at least there is sufficient evidence here that something highly illegal has been done. Maybe this should be investigated, and it never does.
Right.
Speaking of
Well,
what
and anytime they investigate anything, they spend millions of dollars to get nowhere. And I know that I've shared a lot of stuff written by Larry Correa, and he talks about these investigations and audits where the system investigates the system and decides
mm-hmm
that the system hasn't done anything wrong.
yep
you know
there's no
like
external.
there's no oversight, there's no third party investigation. It's always like, we're gonna check ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mark Stein has been bringing up a lot, like at various points, has been bringing up examples of like internal investigations and audits and so forth, in like the British Commonwealth, and how they turn up results much much faster. Gosh, I forgot. Someone an official appointed by the Queen, like I can't remember what the title is called, but for Canada though, like actually had to resign this past week because of like a 6 month investigation into basically her running a terrible office, basically, like a
Hmm.
hostile working environment. And in 6 months from the beginning of the investigation to now, where she had to resign in disgrace, that's all the time it took. Meanwhile, we have these years long investigations into Trump and Russia collusion, and Durham investigating, Comey and the FBI and the DOJ and all that. That and they just go on endlessly and go nowhere. And I
Yeah.
mean, honestly, it feels vaguely like late stage cancer, where it's just where it's just kind of like you're kind of just waiting for the inevitable worst case scenario to occur. That's not even like a joke. It's just it is. It's because the system feels deeply sick and
Mm-hmm.
and corrupt, and it's just without like major reform, it's not going to be fixed. And the problem is that
No.
I think we're well beyond the point of actually getting those kinds of major reforms, especially because
Well, it, any of the people that could, you know, institute major reforms don't, and
mm-hmm,
have no desire to, because it would mean, limits on their power and limits on their wealth, and all of um the kickbacks and deals for their buddies and all this kind of stuff. Like they have no incentive,
mm-hmm,
to implement any kind of reform. And I was thinking the other day, you've got like on the right you have, say, Rand Paul, on the left you have Tulsi Gabbard, and that's it.
mm-hmm,
If you had more people like them on both sides, you would have, honestly better laws. You would have the reform, and um you would see like genuine debate and not this kabuki theater where they pretend to be at odds with each other but aren't.
mm-hmm. The Great American Uniparty is basically what it is at this point.
Yeah.
All the Democrats and about half the Republicans, are all together basically make up one giant uniparty that have minor disagreements with each other occasionally, and that's about it.
Right. Yeah. And I don't think that they really disagree all that much. They probably disagree about the optics more than anything, because,
Mm-hmm.
God forbid those rubes out there in flyover country catch on to the fact that all they care about is, their benefits and their pay and their retirement and their Cadillac health care and all that crap.
Yep. Yep. It's a bad time.
It has been. It's so out in the open now. It's so just completely unapologetic. It really seems like it went from, being hidden, badly hidden, but at least it was, there was some attempt to not come off as, okay, there's, the ruling party, and then there's all of you plebes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like the Trump years just broke them. They were so irate that this upstart came in from, out there in Business Central and dared to presume that he was one of them,
Mm-hmm.
And now all of a sudden they just can't get over it. It's like, no, 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 no. Here's the line. There's all of us and we're important, and then there's all of you. And, if you lose your job because we decided that you couldn't have your job, then, well, just, eat cake or make some solar panels or
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Yep. Yeah.
And
Yeah. But sorry, I didn't know if you were going to say something else. But no, Trump blew the lid off of that entirely, though, and that was the most striking thing. I think the most obvious early symptom of that, of course, was the Never Trump wing of Conservative Inc. You know, the Bill Kristols and the
yeah.
Fred Barneses and the Jonah Goldbergs and everything. You know, all those people. You know that people like us spent years listening to. You know, for all their
Oh, yeah.
insights and
Yeah.
their clever witticisms in the case of Goldberg, only to discover that actually they're all basically just a bunch of limousine liberals who just happen to have, fiscally conservative policy positions, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Because they have
That
zero
it really is. Yeah.
because they have
It's
zero qualms
they're
about. Go on.
exactly like the limousine liberals, but they pontificate about their great virtue all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically the only difference.
Yep. Um, it's really funny. I was thinking about, and I thought about saying this last week, but never got around to it. But over the Trump years, I kind of got tired of watching conservative commentary, in no small part because the Never Trump wing really kind of got on my nerves. I mean, I didn't like Trump in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning either, but there was something with the Never Trumpers that always rubbed me the wrong way. Um, but
Right.
last but
Yeah.
last year
That,
when the George Floyd riots broke out, that's when I started
mm,
reading Ace again. And I always thought that was funny because when I started reading Ace again, it's like that's because I was mad. And
mm,
because for a couple of years, I for a little while I started thinking that Ace of Spades was getting a little too hyperbolic and was getting kind of obnoxious. So I stopped reading him for a while. And then the riots happened, and I'm like, maybe there's something to the anger.
yeah. Yeah.
And it's I guess I bring it up because it's the difference between like the seething frothing rage of the Never Trumpers versus the actual genuine anger of people like Ace and various bloggers at his site, and like the
Well,
genuine.
right. The Never Trumpers seem to, I, at first people were legitimately afraid that he really wasn't going to um be all that much different than another Democrat president. Like, we had nothing to go on.
Right.
So I could understand people being opposed to him then, but then it just turned into the sneering condescension,
Mm-hmm.
and they could never be proven wrong, because it didn't matter what he did. All that mattered was how they felt about how he did it.
Mm-hmm.
And they just didn't like the way that he talked. They didn't like the way that he tweeted. Um, never mind that he created an atmosphere that allowed the country to be very prosperous. It allowed,
Mm-hmm.
a business boom, and you know we had more freedom than we had had previously. Like he repealed some of the restrictions that were restricting freedom of just oh, and my brain's bouncing around all over the place with
Do you talk about?
all
Do you talk about
huh
regulations?
right. I mean there are so many regulations that uh were damaging to business and damaging to personal freedom, and you know I mean, in terms of what he did versus, to benefit the cause of freedom and prosperity versus what he did that would, in some way limit freedoms. I always hear people complain about the bump stock ban. Okay, so that was a bad move. It was a dumb law.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. On average, like he did so much good that, to nitpick at that kind of, the little stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And they only ever did it just so that they could be condescending, and just so that they could, claim like, see, I was right not to like him. I was
Mm-hmm.
right not to support him. And that is what all of the never Trumping came down to, is they had to be proven right all the time, in their hatred of this man, not for, anything substantial, but just because they didn't like his personality.
Mm-hmm. And of course, over the years, they end up revealing them. And of course, over the years, they ended up what? They ended up revealing themselves, to actually be basically liberals in a lot of things. Like a lot of their policy positions and their personal opinions and their moral positions and so forth. Took 180, took 180s. There wasn't like a
Yeah.
some of it was gradual, some of it was sudden, but a lot of them, just basically reveal themselves to basically be Democrats. Because, I mean, if they were serious about conservative policy positions on all fronts, sorry, I'm getting distracted by something. But if they reveal themselves to be, um, or if they profess to be conservatives on policy positions, then they would take then you would assume they would take those positions seriously and not support Democrats who support those positions, where those positions were,
Right.
higher taxes or abortion or any number of
Hmm.
hot button issues, and that's just simply not true. They
Right.
in so many cases they just, and especially in the last election cycle, they just flat out endorsed Democratic candidates, and from Joe Biden on
Yeah.
down.
And it's crazy. I mean, like Trump was, to my great surprise, a very pro-life president. And you've got people that had claimed to be very pro-life for years and years, all of a sudden they just they don't care anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they don't think that Trump has any business being involved in. It's like, what in the hell? You got exactly what you wanted. They got maybe 90% of what they claimed to have wanted in the years prior to Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And they couldn't be happy about it, because they wanted to focus on the 10%, because the 10%, justified their condescension to everyone else.
Ultimately, I think that's the key of it. The thing is that they didn't. I think that in a lot of cases, not all of them, but in a lot of cases, they weren't actually genuine believers in that regard. Like, they weren't genuine conservatives or genuine Christians or anything like that.
I I
You
don't
know.
I don't see how they could be. I mean, unless just, the sin of pride became so great that they couldn't get past, the pricking of their pride, and admitting that they were wrong about this guy. Not necessarily wrong about, that he's blustery and kind of off-putting or whatever, but that he would I hate to use a term that indicates ruling, because our president shouldn't rule over us, but I can't think of the right term right now. But just the fact that he accomplished so much that they claim to have wanted,
Mm-hmm.
and they just couldn't get past being wrong.
Yep. Well,
And I mean, for anyone to openly support, very anti-life, pro-abortion, pro-taxing and big regulation and whatever, for anyone to support Democrats of that caliber, um, to claim that, they're somehow right wing, I
mm-hmm.
don't know how you can make that claim. I really don't. And
You can't.
you're talking about the very legitimate anger of everyone else who wasn't a never Trumper. It's the never Trumpers that fueled a lot of that.
Mm-hmm. I think when it comes down to it, I think that saying that calling these people grifters, both never Trumpers, like in conservative Inc., and like Republicans in the Congress and wherever else, is
Mm.
a lot more accurate than anything, because it's clear that they prefer the power that being the permanent underdog gave them than being the
Oh
people in
yeah.
power actually affecting change, because they realize that if actual serious movement was made on the abortion front, or if Donald Trump moved the American embassy to Jerusalem, or um, or gun laws were loose, or gun restrictions were loosened, or whatnot, then they would have no power anymore. They wouldn't get all that money anymore,
Right.
because there would be success on the policy front. And I don't
Well,
think.
they have to send out emails to thousands of people, like requesting that they fund their efforts to fight all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm. So that they can
And
hold
then
their.
they don't get all of that funding, and also they don't get all of the access, like
Mm-hmm.
the big politics, big convention access to everyone, and uh all of that elbow rubbing that they like to do.
Mm-hmm. Do I hear a cat?
Yes, you do.
Anyway, um, but
I probably have something I can throw at her. She's annoying.
but yeah, um, it's it's been an enlightening few years, sadly. A
Mm.
sadly enlightening few years. But that being said, you did bring up freedom as you were talking, and actually that can go in one or two different directions, honestly, in terms of things we can talk about. But I think I want to talk about the more important issue first before we talk about the meme, because of course there is the matter, because we really just what we really didn't discuss it last week, but there is, of course, the matter of Chairman Xi's gift to the world, um,
Ugh.
and of course the newest developments regarding our favorite infection, and that is, well, there's two things. There's two things that you brought up, but of course they may just segue into other topics. And of course, the first thing we should shut up me. The first thing we should talk about is anal swabbing, because that's the thing everybody wants to talk about, especially people who are watching the show while they're eating.
Right? Come in for a colonoscopy and an anal swab for COVID.
Just
That's
remember,
just
there's nothing wrong
stupid.
with it if you like it.
Yeah, there is. Okay. Before last year, when somehow, to just the amusement of the cosmos, it became it became sensible and virtuous to wear a mask all the time as a healthy person.
Mm-hmm.
Before all of that, if someone had told you that China's going to release a virus and then they're going to convince everyone that they need to have a swab stuck up their butt and that they have to wear 3 masks to be healthy, you would have just rolled your eyes and been like, I don't know what kind of drugs you're taking, but you need to stop.
I probably would have been more crass, but yes, basically
Right.
that'd be the gist of it.
And yet, here we are.
The anal swab thing I don't even get. Is I'm starting to think that the Chinese Politburo is just trying to troll us with that one, because that's
I was I was thinking the same thing. It's like, okay, he
I
he
don't
he we got everyone to stay home and shut their businesses down and wear masks all the time and act like, a 98% survival rate meant that, like the apocalypse was upon us and whatever. Let's see if we can get them to stick swabs up their butts now.
mm-hmm. And I mean, listen, it's not the idea of it isn't super far fetched, honestly, because I know that it shows up in stool samples and so forth. That's been known pretty early on. I don't know if it's more reliable than testing in the actual respiratory system, but I mean, it's not the most implausible thing I heard. It's just that I don't know. Why would you opt for it? Then again, why would you opt for sticking a Q-tip so far up your nose that it touches your brain? But
Sounds like something that was conceived on some Reddit subthread, for the express purpose of trying to make people do dumb things.
yes. Oh, and then I know precisely what happened. And then like some Chinese spy, like Feng Feng, the one who was sleeping with Representative
Mm-hmm.
Swallow, caught wind of it and is like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. I need to tell my masters. And it just went from there, and China started testing it on their hapless citizen subjects, who are especially the ones who have been welded inside their apartments, probably are desiccated corpses by
Right.
now.
All of
Um,
those people that are super free to say, no, Chinese government, we will not do that. Yeah.
we will not let you violate us with a Q-tip, that giant novelty Q-tip. Um,
My
but
gosh.
you know, and it just snowballed from there. And now China's saying, hey, so we have an extremely reliable test, but there's a catch. Oh, that was an unintentional. That pun was not
Right.
intended. That pun was definitely not intended.
I
Um,
mean, we've we've said for years that, communist China is trying to get America to just bend over and take it, but like now we're just literally there.
and this is why I think this is. I feel like this is why I feel like this may be some sort of um, plot by the Politburo to just make us look like fools, because that's something they would do. Um,
It's geared towards all the people that decided that the little profile frames that said stay home, save lives and um quarantine or whatever other ridiculous bullcrap people did on
mm-hmm.
social media. It's for all of those people and for all the Faucis of the world who care only about funding and keeping their cushy government position. Um, all of the people who communists have historically called or referred to as useful idiots.
Yep.
It's for all of them. And
And
unfortunately, it seems like they're in charge.
funnier still, of course, is the fact that um, the communists must be laughing at us now. Like they must, like they must realize that effectively they have us beaten. You know,
Oh, yeah.
because they've had to have looked because they had to have looked at our response to this, and and seeing that, rather than approaching it all like sensible, rational, calm adult. Okay, that happened. Sorry. Like sensible, rational, calm adults. Instead, grossly overreacted and started, and our elite started ruling us like the Chinese Politburo rules their people. Um,
Yep.
that has to have taught them something because to reference Mark Stein again, because one of the two commentators I watch anymore, but to reference Mark Stein again, he points out that China takes its role in world history very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
The Chinese view everything, in terms of the long game. They're looking. They look ahead rather than in the immediately what's immediately in front of them like we do anymore. They look ahead and they
Yeah.
look to see where their power and where their influence is going. And there's no way they haven't looked at our response to Chairman Xi's gift and having concluded that they know precisely how to control us if we're going to
Yeah.
freak out and overreact. And it's clearly an overreaction. Like I think like I believe that the Chinese were genuinely concerned about the flu when it was in Wuhan, but as it started to evolve and as it started to disperse and
Mhm.
everything, they got I think they started to clue in that okay, it was kind of bad at first, it's gotten better, and started acting accordingly too. They were definitely like like they had New Year's celebrations in Wuhan and everything. Well, meanwhile we're locking everybody up in New York City, and
Yeah.
it's just it's just Mayor De Blasio dancing with his wife in Times Square just to spite everyone apparently. Um, you know, I think the Chinese have our number, and it's a sad and scary thought, especially
Right.
with especially with a certain Joe and the White House.
Yep. And I mean, the thing is, like, I know I pointed this out early on, and like, people didn't really start cluing in until I would say around Christmas time. But the language surrounding everything COVID is the exact same language surrounding everything climate change.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing repackaged. It's all of the same, rationalizations and all of the same, you know,
Remedies.
it's basically, yeah, the same remedies, the same policies. It's they just tweaked it for a virus instead of like climate concerns or whatever. Um, and people fell for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like how on earth did you fall for this crap when we've been pushing back against this for years.
One gets the distinct sense that something a lot more sinister is going on than we give it credit for with these sorts of things.
Yeah.
Like once upon a time, like 10 years ago or so, back when Glenn Beck was talking about this stuff all the time, one was a lot more dismissive of it. I was a little less so, but even then, I wasn't so sure that that there was a great global cabal of people, trying to change everything and transform everything. At least not at this point. I mean, sure, it's kind of predicted in the Book of Revelation, but
Right.
at the same time, I wasn't sure. I wasn't entirely sure I believed it, but um, between that and having just having read a couple of interesting books on the topic and so forth, one kind of gets the sense that the world isn't as what's the I guess cut and dry. It's not as straightforward as we think it is, and I don't like to think about that,
It's
but
it's also not as disconnected as we've gotten comfortable believing.
mm-hmm. We don't, because I think once upon a time, we would have thought that that China and the United States, for the most part, were separate entities outside of their economic ties, but I think
Mm,
that's not so true anymore, Joe.
right.
But it's very disheartening is the wrong word for me. For me, at least, I think it's the wrong word. I don't know if I'm disheartened, but I am bothered by it. You know, because I
I'm
suppose,
concerned. It to me, it's very much, you know, it's very much evidence of a spiritual battle that I don't really think that we're ready for. But
no.
it doesn't matter if we're ready for it because it's happening. And,
Mm-hmm.
all of this is, pointing. I don't like where the future's headed. I'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm. That actually brings up something interesting. My mother sent me a book alongside a care package of some of my father's old belongings. Actually, that's something that is worth bringing up really, really quickly because actually there's not, because I just realized we haven't had a show since that happened. But last July, my father passed away. And I just realized that what I just said makes literally no sense unless I add that very important context. My father passed away from cancer though last July, and my mother sent me a box, just a little care package of some of his old stuff, things like his mug and so forth. In fact, his mug is that blue one right there on that little turntable behind me.
Mhm.
But among it, though, she sent me a book called The Oracle. It's by the Rabbi Jonathan Kahn. And it's basically like a little. It's not a little, but it's like it's an interesting book. It's a narrative book. It's a book that's written in narrative style. It talks about biblical prophecy. I could have done without the narrative style. Honestly, I actually prefer slightly drier reads, but it talks about biblical prophecy, and more specifically, it talks about the return of Israel to the land, the return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel, and how the original diaspora is mirrored by their return, in that, like, basically just as a short little microcosm, basically how certain events happened in one order in the original, back when Rome destroyed Israel during their rebellion back in 70 AD,
Mm-hmm.
and how when they returned to the land last century, how that actually happened in reverse order. And it's actually very fascinating, how all the little pieces fall into place and so forth, and how it's all tied to the year of Jubilee and all that. It's all very fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
But I just read a chapter today, actually. I'm towards the end of the book, but I read a chapter today, and it talks about how the same thing, how there's a broader mystery, and how it kind of ties to the church, and how what it is that, in the first century, as the Jews are still tied to the land and everything, and the church is strong, and the church is full of the Spirit and miracles and all this, and then as the Jews are separated from their land, and as the church is separated from the Holy Land, the church starts moving away from that stuff, and the church starts becoming not part of the world. That's inaccurate, though in a lot of ways it did. But how it starts becoming the establishment, how it starts becoming the primary driving force of civilization, and how the church changes. But in the same way that the Jubilean mystery, in that how Israel leaves the land and then returns to the land, the same thing's kind of happening to the church, whereas Israel returns to its land, the reverse is happening, where the church is slowly being leached out of the culture, out of Western culture, and how the church is losing influence. And
Well,
but hmm?
you saw the thing that I shared earlier, and didn't you?
Maybe.
It fits. Hang on.
You are able to share your screen, by the way, if you want to, if you're bringing it up on the laptop. Though it's going to be crappy quality, actually. Though, I don't know. Now I think about it, it's just going to be crappy quality.
I will just.
Actually,
I
it
will
might not be crap.
find it.
I could put it up on the screen later. It doesn't matter. But
I will message it to you.
okay.
That's what I'll do.
But what was I saying? Oh yeah, the but the same thing seems to be happening to the church now, where the church, is the church is now having that same sort of reversal where the church is kind of like falling out of power, falling out of favor, and everything. And but it's like the spirit's growing again. It
Mm.
seems to be, the it's a time of miracles and a time of strengthened faith among the faithful. For all the weakening of the church, you can see
Right.
that. And
The church is become very sort of inundated with culture rather than
right,
being a positive effect on culture. And so, you know, you may not have as many faithful, but it does seem that the
the
quality of the faithful
yeah the
improves as their numbers diminish.
yeah the truth faithful, yeah, basically. And you're also seeing a rise because of course you saw, in the first century, of course, almost all the Christians were messianic Jews, basically.
Hmm.
And now you're seeing a rise in messianic Jews again. um it's all extraordinarily fascinating. I knew a lot of this stuff already, but seeing it just all put together and then just seeing the little details, because I always say that God's fingerprints are in the details. Just
Hmm.
are in the little details. And seeing them, it's very fascinating. And I guess I bring that up because, of course, we're talking about the idea that there's greater forces at work in the world, and you brought up the fact that it's a spiritual battle. And it's interesting because I think because it's you can see that it's all tied together.
Hmm.
When you really look deeper, you can see that it is all tied together. And I guess that's why I would say that I'm not. That's why I was saying earlier that I'm not worried per se, concerned but not worried, because you ultimately know where
Right.
it's all going to end up.
Right. It's gonna be a rough ride to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's gonna be, like hugely uncomfortable
Excuse me.
here, you know, on this earth, for people who are faithful. That's it's the same story. It's played out before. It's gonna happen again. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I'm not looking forward to that because, I am a creature that loves my comforts. But I am not so married to those comforts that I would um deny, uh, you know, God and his sovereignty, and that I would allow myself to be bullied into silence about any of this. I mean, it's like you said, it's all connected. Everything from global politics to local politics to viruses and the economy and everything else. Like
Mm-hmm.
it, there's a lot more going on beneath the surface, and it's all very connected. And so every time someone tries to wag their finger and say, well, you can't deny this, and you can't say that, and you can't basically be truthful, and you can't be faithful. My answer is simply no.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get to tell me I can't do that. You don't get to dictate to me what is and is not truth, because truth doesn't depend on you or your feelings or your opinions or your politics.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
um so I am not looking forward to the bumpy road that gets us to the final destination. But like you said, we can at least have that.
Confidence.
Yes.
Um. But yeah. I wasn't expecting to get onto that tangent, but I guess I did have the Oracle on my mind because it is an interesting book. Jonathan Cahn's very interesting. Being a rabbi and all that, he definitely his knowledge of the Torah and biblical prophecy and all that is actually very, very deep and profound, and the connections he makes are very, very good too. But yeah,
I would love to find some of my dad's notes on Revelation, because he, was a great biblical scholar and did a really wonderful series on Revelation and how it ties into Old Testament prophecies and everything.
all right. Well, we've been going on for a while, but I guess there's one other thing that we kind of want to talk about, just because I just think it's kind of amusing. Um, it's kind of and it's the meme that I shared with you earlier. The sort of libertarianish meme that I happen to have shared in my timeline, because I will put this on the screen in post, just to just so it can clearly be read. But yeah, broad thoughts on that. So I recommend against killing your computer.
It was the end times for my battery.
Good job. proud of you. Anyway, yes, I did look at the messages, and yeah, I did see that earlier. I remember now.
It just, when you started talking about that, I was like, yeah, that's, the church really has fallen away.
Yes. All right. So.
And again, like the interconnectivity of everything, with the church and politics and just everything else.
Anyway, I wanted to quickly end with something a little more lighthearted. And that, of course, is the meme I shared with you earlier. Not exactly light fare, but it's lighter than what we've been talking about, honestly. So, I think it's good.
What? That all started with anal swabbing, and I did not expect it to take that turn. If ever you had anticipated anything would be lighthearted, but here we are.
Yes, right.
And now with your more serious meme is going to be our lighthearted.
Yeah, right. If only we had more time. If only we didn't start half an hour late. But might have had an extra couple of minutes where I'm not, staring at the clock, like, I have to go to bed. But no, that meme I shared with you earlier, though. Broad thoughts before we break it down just a little bit.
Oh. Honestly, I think we pretty much covered that with this whole conversation. Everything from, the policies and regulations and what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. And I mean, even to the point of whether or not we're allowed to leave our homes and, everything else. It's like,
though, admittedly, when you get into the fine details on this thing, it kind of like, you're kind of like, a lot of these are kind of half-formed, half-baked thoughts, I mean, honestly, it's kind of classic libertarian fare if you really think about it. But it's one of those things where I'm kind of just like a little bit, like, for example, like the top part where it says you don't own your own body, but then talks about, marijuana and drug use and underage drinking and draft dodging and prostitution and suicide and all those things. I'm just like, on the one hand, of course, I have always understood the libertarian argument on it. On the other, it is way more complex than simply talking about the legality or illegality of them. You know?
Right. Yeah,
It is
which is
way more
honestly the
complex.
problem. That's honestly the problem with libertarianism in a nutshell, is just the oversimplification of so many
And of
so
course,
many things.
that section also mashes together driving without a seatbelt and flavored e-cig juices with these four other way more serious, or
Right.
five other really way more serious concepts.
I, the one that really makes me giggle is suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, suicide is illegal. Like, what's the punishment if you're successful?
I know, right? I
I
mean,
mean,
that suicide's always been a bizarre one. Suicide's always been a bizarre one. To make it illegal per se. Um,
right? Yeah.
I feel like there should be some other mechanism in place. Since you restarted, your video's been way more stable. What did you do different?
Uh,
What did you do different? I can see you clearly now. What happened?
I, I
You're
don't
not.
know.
Now you just have dumpy pixelated. You have a dumpy pixelated image, but it's moving and it's in sync. Hold on a second. What? What did you do? I mean, it's freezing every now and then, but
I
that's
don't
not
know.
so bad. It's way better. We could have used this for the past show and a half. Showing 9/10 actually. It's what it's gonna be.
This is everyone's this is your treat for hanging in there, I guess.
I guess so. Um, and then of course, but anyway, back to the meme real quick. And then of course there's the bottom section where it says refusing to pay property, estate, and sales tax. Um, and obviously eminent domain and civil asset forfeiture are obviously like actual, like I think they're actually belong there. But the whole refusing to pay thing. What bothers me about that isn't so much that, the whole idea of paying these taxes. The idea that you should be allowed to refuse to pay, because that's the implication here, that you should be allowed to refuse to pay. It's like,
I don't
no,
even think it's that. It's not that you
well,
should be allowed to refuse to pay the taxes, but the taxes shouldn't exist.
yeah, yeah. That's the idea, but the phrasing, the phrasing is the bothers me because when you read that, the idea that it's literally getting across is that you should be allowed to refuse to pay these things, and I'm just like,
This is this is the perfect example of your meme rant last week of why you hate memes.
because I mean, this is so dumb. That's the thing. It's dumb. Because it's mostly clever ideas though, and like I said, with the top section especially, it oversimplifies some actual serious issues like underage drinking and prostitution and draft dodging.
Yeah.
But then it's just refusing to pay, and it's just like, no, because if you get into it, of course the whole thing is the debate's way more complex and has to do with what point does it become valid to refuse to follow laws, and what's the point of having a nation of laws if people can just refuse them willy-nilly. And it spirals into a gigantic rabbit hole that the meme maker clearly never considered. It's like, it's not as simple as your list here makes it. I have no issue with the middle one really, obviously. So I'm not gonna say anything about that. But it was those specific sections about that just kind of like irked me, because I'm just like, ugh. Because you see, yeah, you're right. It comes back to what I was talking about last week. The
It's
problem,
oversimplified and poorly worded, and it's just everything you hate about memes.
yep, it needs, you really, because these are things that you'd like need to kind of get into you need to get to the meat and potatoes of it, to kind of really start getting a sense of what you're talking about. To get a sense of an idea of what the whole, what the debate's about in those things. And just blanket saying these things are illegal and that's bad is of course absurd. Anyway, all right. It is past 9:30. I have to be up in 5 hours. So this
Off
seems
to
like a
bed with you.
this seems like a good point to end the show. Honestly, that was a lot. That show was a lot more coherent than I expected it to be. I guess the drive to realize that I have to go to bed at some point gave me the additional focus I needed to actually run a show properly, as opposed to just meandering around, with my my probable undiagnosed adult onset ADHD, uh, you know, usually allows for. Weird how that works. Anyway, so we want to thank you for watching this episode of Nerd Rage. It's been a ride, mostly a depressing ride, but it's been a ride all the same. Um, but hey, not a long way, not a total potato over there. So there's definitely that. You can actually. What are you doing?
I
You
am taking a picture that I'm gonna send you, and you can put it on the screen. But this is my view.
I'm just saying I can see exactly what you're doing now. Like there's no more one frame and then 10 seconds of nothing happening and then a second frame. Like you're actually we're gonna have to figure out what you did to make this work this time, because that what why is it working? Anyway, as I was saying,
I guess I could send it to you on your computer.
probably could do that.
Okay.
Do that. But yeah, so thank you for watching. Check the description below for links to stuff and things. The notification sound just happened and it startled me. Among those things is a link to my personal Facebook page, because I changed the settings recently that allows it to be followable now, instead of people having to make friend requests of me, because a lot of people on the book face have done that over the years, and it's like this is my personal page. I friended a few of them, of course, like Lindy recently, but but it's like there's a lot of people who I just kind of refuse, because like
Well, if you'll be friends with Lindy, then you can be friends with anyone.
yeah, except I'm not going to do that. My Facebook page is such a disaster because of all the politics and everything. It's my personal page, where all the people I know personally are, but it's also the place where I post politics all the time, and more than a dozen people, more than a dozen people on it, are people who I've never actually really met. So it's just like. But now it is followable, and several people have done that. So if I ever feel compelled to write things on Facebook and give the Zuck more money, feel free to do that. But yeah. So
we should probably start putting things on our website again.
Did you handle the domain?
That's
what I thought. Anyway, so yeah, so that's it for Nerd Rage 192. We hope you enjoyed the show. Leave a like and a comment. Be sure to subscribe, hit the bell for more. Who knows what else might happen in the week? You know what? I've been kind of feeling like maybe streaming video games. I don't know why, but you never know. I might I might start doing things again. It's weird how actually doing something in my life compels me to do more things in my life. But we're not going to talk. But we're not going to talk about that this week, because that's a whole other conversation.
Make sure you show people the picture I sent you, because it's precious.
I'm sure it is. Anyway, until next time, everybody.